Well, good evening and welcome to another episode of Rich Politics. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. I'm so glad you're with us tonight. It's Friday night. That's right. This Welshman ranting about all things politics, and I'm excited about my guests tonight. But before I talk about my guests, have you noticed there's a lot been going on in Scotland? That's just over the border from England. You know where it is, man. Yes, that's right. Nicola Sturgeon has been accused of misleading Parliament. Well, I did mention it last week on the show. If you were watching, I did suggest that might be the case. I didn't say exactly that she was, but I made a suggestion that she may have. Well, my guests, we're not going to discuss that tonight. There's something more interesting that I want to share with you, but I'm going to show you a clip from Sky News last night over the latest in Scottish politics.
Hello, good evening. Sky News understands that a Scottish parliamentary committee has concluded that First Minister Nicola Sturgeon did mislead Parliament. Holyrood's Harassment Committee has reached the conclusion by a majority vote ahead of the publication of its final report. It will significantly increase pressure on Ms Sturgeon to step down. But in the last hour, a spokesperson for the First Minister issued this statement. The First Minister told the truth to the committee in 8 hours of evidence and stands by that evidence. It is clear from past public statements that opposition members of this committee had prejudiced the First Minister at the outset of the inquiry and before hearing a word of her evidence. So this partisan and selective briefing before the committee has actually published its final report is hardly surprising.
Well, there you go. Imagine that. Trouble up in Scotland. It's First Minister under a lot of pressure. SNP, the polling's not looking very good from the polls, actually. They've decreased in the number of people supporting independence as well, which comes on to my guests tonight because we're here to talk about a brand new political party that is launched in Scotland just this week. And just something off their website, just want to give it to you. It says the party stands for Scottish independence from the United Kingdom and European Union. Well, I agree with the latter, as most of you know. The defence of individual liberty, the value and integrity of the family, the sanctity of human life, and the health and welfare of a nation. It is, of course, the brand new party, Restore Scotland, and joining me live tonight is two of their key leaders. It's Ewan Gur and interim party leader David, let me just get this right, David McCutcheon. David, is that right?
Spot on.
Well, welcome to Rich Politics. Firstly, gentlemen, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I know that you've had a busy week. Your press release has gone out. This is the launch week, really, of the new party. Let's begin. Tell us, what is Restore Scotland?
So, Restore Scotland is a party that is standing up for a constituency within the Scottish polity that has been voiceless for too long. That's those that believe in full Scottish independence, both from the United Kingdom and the European Union. Roughly round about 30 years ago, the SNP took a decision that it was going to be an avowedly pro-EU party. And this happened at party congresses as far as we were in the late 80s, and in 1990, delegates turned up, if my memory serves me well, to find that the stage had been emblazoned with a big banner, Independence in Europe. Subsequently, even some of the architects of that slogan and that move have come to see the way that the European Union is characterized by a number of really damaging trends, such as a lack of democratic accountability. They see in the European Union the making of a super state that has no interest in preserving national sovereignty. They see the EU getting into all areas of domestic policy, trying to influence social policy, and of course having huge influence over economic policy as well. And figures from across the political spectrum on the pro-independence side have been increasingly troubled by this, right, centre and left. And so we aim to be a voice for that constituency in Scottish politics, and really to speak up for all ordinary Scots as well, Scots that have suffered under years of misrule under the SNP. So that's a little bit about Restore Scotland.
Yeah.
We're a party of ordinary people, no
I
career
was
politicians.
going to ask that question because you're probably a broad church, and you've got members made up from former SNP members, I should imagine, Conservatives, Labour. I mean, what's the makeup of this new party, David?
Yeah, very mixed. And I think it's one of the most fun things about being involved in Restore Scotland at this point. We have people coming from radical traditions, and we have, folks formerly in radical socialist parties, folk in the centre-left, folk maybe hewing a little bit more to the centre-right, folk that were previously conservative, UKIP, and SNP, of course. So a right mixture. Labour as well. You know, a lot of interest, and we were reaching out to people. You wouldn't think it, would you? Right? Because it's like Labour Party doesn't agree with us on either of those two constitutional issues. But Labour has stopped speaking up for the working classes, and we currently, with the greatest of respect, have a bit of a champagne socialist in charge of the Labour Party, and if you look at our membership, the sort of people that are really, that the Restore Scotland message is really resonating with, a lot of people are people that go out every day, they have to graft, they're on minimum wage or close to the minimum wage, and they know what it is to work with their hands to earn a living.
Yeah, I'll come to you, Ewan, because we talked last week, Ewan, didn't we? You were on the show last week. We were talking about a whole different subject last week. It's great to have you back on. You're like my Scottish correspondent, really. That's what you are. The Welshman and the Scotsman down there. That's right, Dave. But I know, Ewan, that you've been involved, along with David and many others, in the formation of this new party. Tell me, what sets you apart from the SNPs then? Because they're pro-independence, like yourselves, that's their key policy. They have many other domestic policies, I'm sure you have as well. But what sets you guys apart from them? What's the difference?
Well, they're not a party of independence. They support welding us back to the diktats of the European Union. That is not political independence, as you well know. Richard, you and I share a similar view on the anti-democratic and illiberal nature of the European Union. And so for me, it's about setting out a prospectus that is about true independence, and that is why we've taken the stand that we have. But as David said, I think a number of the people who are drawn to our message are people who were previously members of the European Union and remember the SNP when it was a traditionally Eurosceptic party. For instance, last week, we had there was a resignation of a gentleman called Donald Morrison. Donald is now our deputy leader. He's supporting David in the leadership of the party. He was a member of the SNP for 54 years until last week, and he resigned as vice convener of his local branch. The convener was on the phone. The MSP candidate was on the phone. The chairman of the party got in touch via email because they're concerned. They're aware that the party has put out this stop Brexit message that really was very clear in 2019 as part of their general election campaign, and it has completely alienated many of the traditional party members who have paid their dues for years, have invested decades in this party, but feel thoroughly betrayed. So we're a party that are committed to that traditional stance of true independence from Westminster, but also from Brussels.
So David, let me ask you this question as the interim party leader. I mean, you've said at your stall you're different in the sense that the SNPs want independence, want to rejoin the European Union. But you guys have said clearly you don't. That's not the ambition for an independent Scotland. You want to be independent from the UK and from the European Union. I mean, how else do you differ? Are there domestic policies that you're standing on in relation to the elections coming on the 6th of May, as opposed to what the SNPs are standing on? Well, are there domestic issues that you guys are passionate about?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And the SNP, I think, has really betrayed its vision to become a broad church, pro-independence party with a singular vision, which is delivering independence for the Scottish people. They have bought into a tremendously destructive social agenda, which is in many areas running counter to the instincts, the beliefs, the traditions of the Scottish people. So one area where we see this is in speech. As you know, in Scotland, we like to speak our mind. We sometimes speak too much, but we do really treasure the ability to speak freely, you know, the ability to say what is on our heart and mind, the ability to say things that are wrong sometimes and be challenged on that, and to challenge other people. And this is an absolutely essential right if you're going to have a democratic system. And yet we've seen the SNP government put through one of the most draconian hate speech bills, pieces of legislation that I'm aware of anywhere in Europe and in many countries that we would maybe consider to be authoritarian. They don't have comparable legislation. So this is legislation that would see you go to jail for up to 7 years for saying things that are offensive or likely to stir up hate. And the problem as well with this is the test. It is a test that is very subjective. I mean, anyone that's involved in politics, I'm sure you will have found this yourself, you're accused all the time of being offensive. You know, you can say the most innocuous thing in political discussion and you're accused of being offensive. So this is extraordinary legislation. It's deeply draconian, deeply troubling, and it is one of the very first things that elected to government. Okay, we're a little bit early for that perhaps, but you know, certainly if we get 1 or 2 people into Parliament, we will be standing up for the freedom of speech right from the very beginning, because it's absolutely essential to every other issue.
So let me ask some questions to you, Anu, and tell me, this is a brand new party, pro-Scottish independence, not wanting to rejoin the EU, got a number of domestic policies, standing candidates in the elections, I should imagine, on the list and constituency. How are you funded? Where's your money coming from?
Currently, we are funded by the generosity of our members. It's really is a grassroots movement. I mean, we would be delighted to secure a healthy benefactor, but the great thing is that it's a democratic party, and I think that that's the key thing. I mean, David's absolutely right. On the domestic agenda, one of our commitments, and you mentioned it, is the liberty of the individual. I think that for us is a key component. The SNP has gone on a very authoritarian gone on in a very authoritarian direction in the last few years. That is most notably emphasised in the passing of the new Hate Crime and Public Order Act, as it's now known. It was previously a bill. But not only that, but the named person diktat, which was part of the Children and Young People's Bill, the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act, the smacking ban on two out of those 4 instances. There were interventions by external bodies to say these are a breach of human rights. That is the kind of party that we have governing Scotland at the moment. This is thoroughly disturbing, Richard. And here we are having a free, open, transparent, democratic discussion. Good God, could you consider the day when we can't have this? This is a shambles. And so I think people like David and I have been sitting in the trenches, watching things play out, and have finally felt that it's time to actually get out of the trenches and onto the battlefield and start to raise some of these issues in the public sphere. But in relation to your question, we are absolutely funded by our own membership and by the generosity of the people that are involved.
I mean, you can see why I ask that, because that's one of those questions, you know, the media always ask, and you stuff like, you know, so this new party, you haven't got some Russian funding for the back door, you know. I've been accused of receiving tens of thousands of pounds from Russian donors. I wish I knew where they were. If you have their email address, let me know. I can contact them, because I'm skint anyway. So
Is
I
that
know
why
the
you're
feeling.
called rich politics?
Yeah, yeah. And do you know the funny thing is, you were talking about that, some of these domestic policies that seem ludicrous now, and if you mentioned them 10 years ago, they would have been just, out of hand. We would have no, that's never going to happen. Like the hate crime bill and stuff like that, and the policing and censorship on freedom of speech, and even to the point of freedom of thought in your own home. I mean, it's gone so far. The woke left liberal agenda seems to be taking over our politics massively, to the socialist camps, that is. But of course, there is a place for centre right politics. There needs to be, a debate and discussion had with people with different political views. But I find closing down, and I've seen this, people have been deplatformed, the closing down of those who have some kind of centre right values in politics happening a lot more than what happens to those on the left. I mean, you only had to watch BBC Question Time last night, but anyway, that's another story for another time. I want to come to the party. I want to speak about Restore Scotland, right? So you've got a big challenge ahead of you. You're a brand new party. We've seen in the UK a number of parties since Brexit, since the whole Brexit fiasco that took place, where for years politicians went against the biggest democratic vote in our history, and we saw lots of political parties begin to form. The Brexit Party being one of them, the most successful, I would say, having got so many people elected to the European Parliament. And then you consider things like Lauren Fox with Reclaim, and there's a few other fringe parties as well. And they've got all these different parties with the mayoral elections coming up in London and in Manchester, and all these different parties and new politicians are rising out of nowhere all of a sudden. And here we are. We are 7 weeks away from an election in Scotland on May the 6th. The SNPs are in turmoil. I'm not too sure what's happening with the Conservatives up there. I know they're calling for Sturgeon's resignation. Do you think this is a good time to launch a new political party, David?
Oh, absolutely, yes. You better believe it. The SNP are 100% committed to rejoining the EU with a certain. I mean, here it is. This is the campaign propaganda we get through our door right here. Point number 3: rejoining the EU. There it is in black and white. I'm not sure if you can see that on the screen. So
yeah,
they are making it an election issue. They are making it, and I think this is even more troubling. They're making it absolutely integral in their view to being a supporter of indie, and I think that is just demeaning in the extreme, and it's completely illogical. The number of times veteran campaigners like Don Morrison heard on the door, "Why do you want us to leave one union and rejoin another?" This is the sort of thing that ordinary people grasp very, very intuitively. But by the time you've spent, a few decades in the Hollywood bubble, it starts to seem like something that might actually be logical. And so we're just standing up for that common sense view of ordinary Scots that independence means independence. Let's not stop receiving laws from Westminster, but also let's not immediately sign up, as the SNP have done, even prior to rejoining the EU, according to their plan, to legislation from the EU. They're actually backdooring it into Scots law right now, with primary legislation passed through the Scottish Parliament, which allows them basically to make regulations that draft this EU law that we've had zero say over onto the Scottish statute books. That's how fanatical they are about the EU. So you better believe it, there's a need for a new party in the Scottish scene.
Yeah, just taking a piece from your website, I used at the intro to the interview this evening. The party stands for Scottish independence from the United Kingdom and the European Union. When I mentioned that, I agree with one of those, and we're going to come to that a little bit later. We'll talk with Scottish independence. But some of the key policies then of your party: the defence of individual liberty, the value and integrity of the family, the sanctity of human life, and the health and welfare of the nation. Are those your kind of key policies or motivators as a party? Ewan, I'll ask you first.
All right. Yeah, yeah. I think that would be fair to say. There's two very clear constitutional commitments there, but there are other things that weld us together as well. I've spoken about the liberty of the individual, but the value and autonomy of the family. I think many would believe would agree, sorry, within our party, that the family is ultimately one of the anchors of society. It brings stability, it brings health, it brings resilience, and actually, the undermining of that and the recent passing of the smacking ban, which is an odious piece of legislation, which is not even funded in Scotland. I mean, I was speaking to a friend recently who is very senior within Police Scotland. He said that the budget that they've got to actually implement this piece of legislation is just over £30,000. That's nothing. That's just above an average person's salary. Annual salary. It's ridiculous. So this is a piece of dead legislation that's never going to get used, and if it does, good Lord help us. But not only that, but we also have a commitment to life, which is right across the board. We're really concerned that in the next parliamentary session, Ruth Davidson has already made it clear that she's very supportive of assisted dying. That for us is something that is a concern. That's something that we would feel very inclined to oppose. We also support life right throughout, not just the life of the unborn, but also for the born. That's where the health and the welfare element comes into it as well.
Right.
As we want to see people living in a country where we can take care of those who are unable to take care of themselves, but also we give people the ability to we lift people out of the difficulty that they're experiencing. And I think that's one of the things about Scotland, is it is very much it takes a very communitarian approach to issues. That's something that we would support, and really about going back to the days of William Beveridge. William Beveridge once said, when he was...
I thought you were going to say William Wallace then for a minute.
William Beveridge said when he was pioneering the welfare state that adventure comes not from the half-starved, but those who are well-fed enough to feel ambition. I love that, because it was really about building a relationship between the state and the citizen, but not about regulation between state and the citizen. That's what we've got now, especially around lockdown. It's about putting laws between people and between individuals and the institution. That for me is very disturbing. We need to find a way in which we can support people's individual liberty, individual freedom and agency to live freely in the world. And that for me is, I think, a core component of what we're about.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the blue elephant in the room. Notice my reference to blue, because I'm speaking to boys in Scotland, not the white elephant. Independence, Scottish independence. Now, of course, in Scotland, you've been torn. You've had a referendum. The people said no. And we were told it was once in a generation kind of vote, and that was it. Boris won't consent to another one. Nicola Sturgeon kicking up a fuss saying it's not for Boris to decide Scottish future, and it's up to the people of Scotland to decide. Now, you're a pro-independence party. I wonder, what's the case for independence then, gentlemen? David, I'm going to begin with you, because I'm a unionist, right? And I'm not here to argue. I'm the host. But I've got to say, I think independence would be bad for Scotland, not just in our relationship within the union, which I think you might agree is an important one, but fiscally, there are so many real questions that are unanswered over currency and inflation and all that kind of stuff, the borders. And there is so many questions that are left unanswered. And the sustainability of independence, although Scotland is a big producer, I know. I mean, is there a case for Scottish independence? Is there an appetite for it? Or have we seen what's happened recently with the SNP cause people to think twice about Scottish independence? Your thoughts, David?
Well, starting at the end of your question, I mean, definitely we would see the SNP's domestic policies, their internal squabbling scandals as being quite destructive to the cause of independence, actually. Unfortunately, there's a very strong association that you don't get on the unionist side. You have three parties, Labour, Conservative, and the Liberal Democrats, that are all broadly unionist. And by setting up, we really aim to offer an alternative. But why independence, right? And that's a very broad question. You brought up a number of factors. I think the key and the most fundamental thing is that we believe that nations should have their own states. I think Scottish identity is an ancient one. It goes back at least 2,000 years to the ancient Caledonians, and I understand that for many people on the Unionist side, that leaving the United Kingdom would be hard on an emotional level. I think, though, that the rational case for Scotland leaving, in terms of its ability to thrive in the modern world, is very clear. I mean, we don't. We do grasp that there are current issues fiscally in terms of the way that Scotland is receiving, as some would say, a subsidy from Westminster, but actually having to pay our own way in the world, having to raise the money that we spend ourselves would be good for Scotland. Currently, Scotland is being treated almost as a dependency within the United Kingdom. And this is something that is very, very unhelpful and unhealthy on a number of levels. So I think it would be good. I think it would lead to maturing of modern Scotland. I think we would have more confidence on the world stage. Why not have the British Isles become a little bit more like Scandinavia, with an independent Scotland, maybe an independent England, Wales, and Northern Ireland? Who knows?
These independent lots always quote these other smaller countries all the time. I get it all the time. The Welsh nationalists do it down here with me, right? I'm not putting you in the same category as the nationalists, but I have the same problem here. They're like, well, Rich, what about Norway? What about? I'm like, it's a different country. The demographics are different. The economy is different. The industry is different. I mean, and we're in Wales, 3 million people, small country, and they're Welsh independence. Now, I know that it's been said by the leader of Plaid Cymru, Adam Price, pro-independence, as you know, Welsh independence, that they see themselves as being 10 years behind Scotland in the whole kind of independence debate, if you like. I'm kind of guessing they're more like 50 years behind, to be honest. But anyway, I think for Scotland, I mean, do you think independence is as important to people right now, leading up to these elections, Ewan, given what's been happening this week with the SNPs?
Two things I think to say immediately on that, Richard, is when you have a pandemic that is tearing through a country, it is really important to put the health and the welfare of the people first. And I think that that needs to be priority number one. I think, secondly, I do have concerns about the democratic legitimacy of the current situation. I mean, consider for a moment if, things, if it's, ultimately James Hamilton QC comes out on Tuesday and says that he feels that Nicola Sturgeon should stand down. I don't think he would ever be as blunt as that. But if that actually happens, and we have a situation where the leader of the governing party in Scotland steps down literally 6 weeks before an election, this is going to have a cataclysmic effect on their ability to secure a majority and therefore secure the mandate that they need. This is why Restore Scotland's prominence at this point is so important, because not only are we going to be fighting the elections on a very small scale in 2021, but I don't think this is going to be the big election. I think that 2026 is going to be even bigger, because I'm not convinced the SNP will secure a majority. And the thing I would say is that democracy is a precious thing. I know you agree with that, Richard. I think for us, the view is that I come at this from a position of a Democrat. I support Brexit on the basis of democracy. I also support Scottish independence for similar reasons. But I think Scottish independence is too precious to leave in the hands of the SNP. And I am not attracted to their version of independence, which isn't independence.
Sorry to jump in there.
I just want to say one more thing, though, Richard. Go on. And this is really important. You're always going to be welcome in Scotland. That's an absolute given. You've always got a place to stay when you come here, because you are one of our you're one of our UK compatriots. That's never going to change. And the SNP has poisoned the well with Westminster. Some of the language that they use, this anti-English rhetoric, is poisonous. We don't need it. That's what I was going to
that's what I was going to ask you. So, I mean, you answered the question. Really, the SNPs haven't done Scottish independence any favours, have they really?
I think that to look at the way that the role that they have played historically they've been a significant factor in the drive towards independence. I am not sure that they are the ones to deliver independence. That's my concern, is they're doing more to affect the ascent of independence at the moment with their internal lack of sexual self-restraint. We've read some of the stuff that's going on. This is not just salmon. This is actually related to Patrick O'Grady, who's one of or Patrick Grady, sorry, who's one of their MPs and the chief whip at the moment, and then obviously there is the allegations against Alex Salmond, which have been thrown out. So my concern is that really what torpedoed the argument for independence in 2014 was the currency and the economy, and the SNP has not resolved that question. That's still you talked about the blue elephant. That is still the elephant in the room, and that issue needs to be resolved. But I think that it's really high time that some new voices come to the table and say, actually, we need to set out a new prospectus for independence that is generous, that is civil, that allows us to have a conversation with Richard Taylor without restraint. Which is not what the SNP want to encourage.
So talking about coming to that, because our time's almost up, guys. I've really enjoyed discussing with you today. Elections coming up on the 6th of May. So Restore Scotland, brand new party launched this week. Will you be standing candidates both in constituency and on the list? What's your plans, David?
Yes, we plan to be standing, and we have a particular focus on two of the more northern regions of Scotland. So the two northern regions of Scotland, so that's the Northeast and Highlands and Islands. We're looking at other areas. There are some great opportunities at the moment. If any of the listeners to the show fancy themselves as a candidate for Restore Scotland, I would say get in touch very, very quickly with us because we have a deadline coming up. The 31st of March is the deadline for candidate nominations. So if you're a last-minute follower of Restore Scotland, we would say grasp the thistle. And we would also be planning. We are also planning to stand in the constituencies as well, because we mean it when we say that we're the only major party going into this election with a 100% commitment to full independence from both the UK and the EU. We are not a supporting act to the SNP. And if you look at some of the other new parties that have come through in recent weeks and months, it's very clear they want you to vote SNP with your first vote and to give them your second vote. They're squabbling over the scraps. But what we want to do is to offer, as Ewan said, an entirely different vision of Scottish independence.
Yeah, I like the phrase you used there. We're not a supporting act to the SNPs. That might be the title of the broadcast, I think. I like that. It's very good, that is. I'm gonna round it off, and we're going to come to you, Ewan, and then I'm going to finish off with you, David. Just one question, and you can speak straight to the camera, straight to the viewers, Ewan. Why should people in Scotland vote for Restore Scotland?
Well, as I say, Richard, the situation that we have at the moment is there is not a party that represents that position for true independence in the Scottish Parliament. There's no one there that's speaking out for this, and the people of Scotland are being hoodwinked by this message of independence. But let's get out of one union and join another. It's just absolute fallacy, and I think our job is to really try and get the message out there and try to convey the reality that actually being part of the European Union prevents so many liberties and freedoms from being enacted. This is purely on a political level. I mean, we've just seen today an announcement that the rail lines are going to be nationalised in Scotland. Now, that could not have been done if we were still beholden to EU legislation. It was why the Scottish Government was prevented from doing it earlier than now. So it really has a massive material impact on our daily lives. And we are the one party that is speaking out for full independence, for true independence, from decoupling ourselves not only from Westminster, but also from the European Union, and having a generous debate that doesn't resort to stone throwing, that doesn't criticise our compatriots in Westminster, but is actually about having a negotiation about what the future of our democracy can look like.
Well, thank you very much for that, Ewan. Well, David, as party leader, or interim party leader of Restore Scotland, you might not get in the Scottish Herald, or you might have already been in there. You might not get BBC Scotland to run it, but this is your chance to speak to the Scottish people electorate. As party leader, why should people vote and support for your party?
Well, we've already been featured this week in The National, The Scotsman, and the Shetland Times, the only newspapers in Scotland that matter. The three reasons that I would say are very straightforward: sovereignty for Scotland, justice, and freedom. These are the three things that we put front and centre of our campaign: sovereignty, justice, freedom. So if you, like us, recognise that these are things that are lacking in modern Scotland, then vote Restore Scotland on the 6th of May.
Well, David, Ewan, thank you ever so much for joining me on Rich Politics this evening. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's great that we can agree on some things and disagree on others. We're still friends. We're still comrades in arms in this United Kingdom. And thank you so much for coming on. And to all of my guests and viewers, and those of you watching in Scotland in particular, don't forget we're on every Friday night. Joining me next week is Nick Buckley, MBE, and he's going to be setting out his pitch to become the next mayor of Manchester. So that's going to be interesting. Guys, thank you so much for coming on, and I wish you all the best in the elections, and we'll get you back on when it's all done and dusted, as they say. How does that sound?
Perfect. We'll be there.
Yeah, Richard,
Cheers,
it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having us again.
Absolute privilege. Catch you the same time next week. You're on Rich Politics. Bye for now.